Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where professionals in the field inform, educate and then inspire the community to be healthier and balanced and live the lifestyle they love. Our first guest today is health coach Denise Mokadsi. Will be discussing what the best diet is for you. Do your genetics hold the answers? Welcome, Denise.
Hi, how you going?
With so many diets out there, it can feel overwhelming. Why doesn't one diet fit all of it?
It's so frustrating, isn't it, for people to find what's the right diet or best nutrition advice for them. Because we are all so different, it's hard to have a one diet fits all. It just won't work. And so the genes, our genes, really do hold the answer to what is going to be the best diet for us. And the way that we look at that, because it's food and our genes, it's lifestyle and our biology together, that's epigenetics basically. So it's how do we make our lifestyle work for us given the biology we've got. So maybe some people have heard of epigenetics, but to help people understand what it actually is, it is basically the influence of our lifestyle on our genes. So epi refers to above or beyond the genes, and the genetics part is talking about our DNA. So what changes does our lifestyle bring to our genetics? How does it change the expression of our genes? And when we know that, we can work out maybe what diet is going to be best for us. That's kind of really why one diet doesn't fit everybody, because we're all just so different.
Denise, how can knowing our own genetic makeup help us choose the best diet for our own individual bodies?
This is quite an important one, because if we're eating foods that don't suit our genetics, then it's adding more stress into the body or causing more disease or illness down the track if we continue to do it. So understanding our genes can be very beneficial for that reason. For example, if you've got an allergy to gluten, for example, or your body doesn't process gluten properly, then that's going to be a big stress into your body. So it's helpful to know that you've got a gene or some gene variation that means that you're not going to process gluten properly. We can test for multiple types of foods with gene testing, but also from an epigenetic point of view, we can see how someone is metabolizing carbohydrates or caffeine or fats. And when we know that we've got better predisposition to certain foods, then it just means that we're eating foods that are, like I said, not going to harm us. So, for example, some people you might know have coffee straight after dinner, like an espresso after dinner, and they're fine. It doesn't affect their sleep. But someone else who is a slow caffeine metabolizer, for example, would struggle doing that. They would stay awake all night, or they might even have a coffee earlier in the day after lunch, and it still affects their sleep because they're taking quite a long time to metabolize the caffeine. So that's another way that we could be really helpful for what we're choosing, what foods we're choosing to eat. The other thing that is often missed for a lot of people is the timings of food, and we can work out epigenetically when is going to be best for someone to eat. So for example, someone might be better to just eat one bigger meal during the day and have more that intermittent fasting or fast for long hours throughout the day, whereas someone else, it's much better for their body to eat smaller, more frequent meals. So they might be someone that has 5 or 6 small meals consistently throughout the day compared to someone else that has just one. Or someone will be better to metabolize carbohydrates, so they would be better on a vegetarian kind of diet. Someone can be better metabolizing protein, so they might do well having meat and fish and things like that. So understanding all of that is very helpful. Yeah, it just takes the guesswork out. You can try to eat all sorts of different foods, but you might notice that you don't feel particularly well after eating a particular food or eating in a certain way. Like if you do eat frequent small meals, like maybe you just don't feel good doing that. So at least the genetic testing takes out the guesswork. You don't have to go through the struggle of like not feeling well because you're eating a certain way or certain foods. And so there's lots of ways that we can actually test for that. We can do genetic testing on sequences of DNA, of the codes. And that might be a blood test or a cheek swab or saliva or urine or stool if we're looking for gut issues. Or we can do epigenetic testing from phenotypical measurements. So basically that's what someone looks like, someone's appearance. So we can just do lots of different measures, and the relationship of all of those measures gives us very powerful information. It's super interesting. Like the relationship of your wrist size to your arm length, to your finger length, and to your neck size and your thigh, like all of those measurements give us information how they relate to each other, which gives us clues about the genetics that we've got and how we're interacting with our lifestyle, because how we are doing that is influencing our outcomes, like how we're showing up because of the result of our genes and what we're doing with our lifestyle.
Thanks for such valuable information, Denise.
Thank you.
If you'd like to know more about how genes affects our success in dieting and Denise, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we have another interesting guest with another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova will be talking about breathing retraining and its importance. Welcome back. Our second guest is naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova, and she will be talking about breathing retraining and its importance. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is such a fantastic topic. I love talking about that.
So can you tell us a bit about breathing retraining and its importance?
I always start talking to people about the rule of three. And the rule of three tells us about our survival needs. And an average human person can't live without food for, on average, 3 weeks, without water on average 3 days, and without air up to 3 minutes. And that just shows us a hierarchy of importance of where we should put our attention to. And breathing is automatic. So the question that I get asked a lot is, why is it so important? Because we breathe. What's wrong with how I breathe? And the thing is that in our modern life, we do get a lot of triggers, a lot of stresses. And I'm not talking about emotional stresses or mental. It's chemical stresses from the environment, from our food, especially packaged food. And that affects how we breathe through the nervous system. So when we deal with a stressor, and if we talk about chemical stresses, it tells the body that there is danger. When there is danger, the body will start breathing differently, as if you're running away from a tiger. And if that happens day in, day out, that becomes a habit. That becomes a pattern. A pattern is formed, and the body keeps breathing in a certain way. That's where breathing retraining comes into play. And what we do, we look at what habits have been formed up to now, and we retrain the body to reverse that pattern. So if they have a very obvious chest breathing, so breathing with the upper chest, you notice that the shoulders are moving when you breathe. So some people, when they sit up straight, you can noticeably see the movement of the shoulders. So that's not functional. This tells the body that you need to be alert, that it's stress, that you're running away from danger, and that's not a very optimal way of living, really. So nasal breathing above all. So we need to reestablish nasal breathing for proper function of the whole body, because our breathing affects our pH in the blood. It affects relaxation and contraction of the muscles, the muscle recovery, and we are all muscle. Our digestive tract is a muscle, contracting, pushing the food down. Our airways contracting, relaxing. Our heart is a muscle. So we need to help the body function properly, and breathing is the first step to do that.
Can you demonstrate one of the techniques with breathing retraining?
For the fun of it, today we can do a bit of samurai breathing, I call it. So I always go back to that story that in ancient Japan, when they picked a young boy to be a samurai or a young man, they would do a breath test, breathing test, and they would use a feather for that test. So I do have a feather with me, and I'll show you how to do that. What that test does, it shows us whether the body is at its optimal. So whether the body can slow down and breathe gently without force through the nose and slowly, right? When we have that, we know that we can relax and we can focus, right? So relaxation and focus, they come hand in hand. So I have this feather with me. It's a beautiful feather. And this is what I give to kids who come to do breathing retraining with me, and adults as well, because it's fun. And it brings that concentration into the breathing process, because breathing can be relaxing. You can really relax into that and forget that we're doing the retraining. So what we do is we sit up straight. So if you sit up straight and imagine that you have a string attached to the top of your head and someone is pulling the string up, and your whole spine is nice and straight, and you have a fine feather under your nose. So we can use our finger just to feel the warmth, how much air we breathe out, and focus on that for a little bit. And once you get that normal breathing, so it's just normal breathing, whatever comes, when you have that and you feel that warmth on your finger, and relax into that, the back is straight. And the next step here is to breathe in a little bit less. Just imagine in your mind's eye that you breathe a little bit less, right? And you will notice that there is not as much warmth. So it's still warm, you're alive, yeah, the air goes in and out, but it's a little bit less, not as much air hits the finger, right? And with the feather, it gets a little bit more fun, because you can see the fine fibers. They move when I speak, they move when I breathe. So with the feather under the nose, the aim is to be able to breathe very, very gently, just for a minute or two, so that the fine fibers, they stay relatively still. They move a little bit because they're really, really fine, as you can see. You don't need a feather. You can just use your finger and imagine that airflow, and that you breathe less and less and less, not to the point of dizziness, but just as a game, as a little play, to see how gently and slowly and quietly you can breathe for a minute or two.
And what tips would you give to people who are interested in breathing retraining?
Right. So first and foremost, we need to be aware. What is happening in the body? And there is a lot of mindful practices nowadays. And one of the best practices for mindfulness is being aware of your breathing pattern. Drop into the body. See what's happening with the muscles, where the diaphragm is moving, whether you're breathing with your chest, whether the mouth is open, or you're okay to breathe through the nose, or sometimes it's difficult and you're a bit blocked and congested. So what's happening there? So just that awareness, and you can weave that. You don't need to find 10 minutes, I need to do my breathing and find some time and space. It can be as easy as you stop at the red traffic light and you can check in with the body. What's happening? Where is my breathing today? What is happening with my chest, with my diaphragm? Am I breathing through the nose? Is it heavy? Can I hear myself breathe? So all those questions, and then you address that one symptom at a time. And always seek advice of a professional breathwork facilitator, qualified naturopath, medical professional, to help you on that journey.
Thank you so much, Julia, for those insights. If you'd like to know more about breathing retraining and Julia, you can visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. After the break, we'll be back with another interesting guest and another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, holistic grief counsellor Gemma Kyriakou will be talking about managing the grief of a miscarriage. Welcome back. Our last guest is holistic grief counsellor Gemma Kyriakou, and we'll be discussing how to manage the grief of a miscarriage. Welcome, Gemma.
Thank you, Melissa.
How can we support parents that are going through miscarriage?
A lot of women I know will want to self-isolate and hide away. It's really staying in contact, and even just a text message to keep the lines of communication open, talking about it, not pretending like it never happened. A woman's body will be going through so much physically and emotionally, and we need to allow her space for that to process. Emotionally, there's a lot that's happening hormonally. The woman's body will be going through a lot physically as well, which will have a painful aspect to that, whether she decides at whichever week she miscarried, she will have the decision on whether she would like to miscarriage naturally or through a procedure, and that again will depend on other factors as well. Now we also have to remember the partner's mental health through this. Generally, the husband, he has to, come in and support and hold space for his partner through such a difficult time, which he can't 100% relate to. He doesn't understand what it's like to lose, a life inside of you. And there's nothing you can say to a woman or parents, for that matter. There's nothing you can say to them to make them feel better in that moment. The best thing you can do is literally just to be there for them. But with looking after the man's mental health, the husband, the partner's mental health as well, and checking in on them to see how they are, because the emphasis will generally always be on the woman, which we have to, because physically she's going through something that is very traumatic. There isn't anything you can say to a woman to make her feel better, or parents, for that matter, to make them feel better in a situation of a miscarriage. I know for myself, going through a very long fertility journey, and having procedures, going through IVF, and then getting pregnant with my first baby, and then seeing the baby on the monitor and the heartbeat, and then the baby died. There's nothing you can say to a woman that goes through that, because it was such a long journey to get there. And then, that happened. It can affect your faith in, say, your religion. That's very common to happen with such traumatic endings. But I can tell you, in time, you do get that faith back again. It's a lot to process, and we have to acknowledge our feelings and our emotions. I definitely wanted to self-isolate. I wanted to hide away until I got pregnant again, just to make it easier on myself, because there's always christenings, there's always kids' birthday parties, and you get to an age in your life as a woman where, like, all your friends are getting married and having children. And it's very painful to have to, see, you're happy for people. Of course you are. You're really happy for people to, announce their pregnancies. There's no doubt about that. But it's also really painful when you haven't got there yet, and you've had miscarriage after miscarriage, or you're on a really long IVF journey. So we need to, again, really acknowledge those feelings, and everything we feel is validated, keeping those lines of communication open, talking to a friend, because we don't want to get to a place where we're mentally affecting ourselves. We don't want to have anxiety. Our bodies need to be in homeostasis to carry, a pregnancy to term. That's what we need to be.
Is miscarriage still a taboo subject?
It's a very sensitive topic, and I like to think that society is becoming more compassionate and aware of miscarriage and how to support women and parents in this very challenging time of their lives. Miscarriage Australia statistics show that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, which primarily happens in the first trimester. That's 25% of pregnancies. which actually equates to 285 miscarriages per day. That's a lot. But not to install fear into anyone. This is really just having an understanding and knowing that you're not a number. Whilst it does happen frequently, this is to have some understanding about how fragile life can be. There are many factors as to why miscarriage occurs, and some of the reasons are completely unknown.
So what advice would you give for people dealing with the grief of a miscarriage?
The advice I would give to people that are experiencing miscarriage is to literally take each day by day. You really have to be kind to yourself, honour how you feel, really look after yourself, really set yourself personal boundaries. If it's going to be too much for you to go to that birthday party, don't go. We're not talking about avoiding situations forever, but in the short term, a slight distraction of not going can be beneficial. Avoiding our triggers long term is not something I would advise, but short term, just do whatever you need to do to get through to the next stage of your healing journey. And of course, always, if you feel that you need extra support, talk to someone, a professional that knows what you're going through, so you can feel understood and not misunderstood as many people do. Because what happens when we go through such traumatic experiences, we can express ourselves in a way that is misunderstood through anger or rage, or just isolation and not saying anything. Everyone will react differently. So really just to be kind to yourself and find that support with someone that can resonate with how you feel and take you through the steps to feel emotionally well again.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today, Gemma.
Thank you.
If you'd like to know more about how to manage the grief of a miscarriage and Gemma, go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. That's all we have time for today. Until next week, goodbye.
If you'd like to know more about our show, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.